Hi. Welcome. So I'm very glad to be here today because I can finally share with you what we've been up to at Firebase. Because today, more than ever, Firebase has the tools you need to build a successful app. I'm also excited because I kind of came to I/O this year the long way around. See, I actually left a great job at Google 4 years ago. I wanted to dive into this app development thing and change the world with a small startup. This small startup had a unique vision. We thought that we could empower developers by letting them focus on the user experience they wanted to create and not the backend that needed to support that. And that startup, of course, was Parse. So before I rejoined Google and teamed up with the Firebase team last year, I spent 3 years in the Parse team. I'm most commonly known there as the lead developer for Parse Push, and also the type of person who was called in when there was reliability or scalability issues that tended to hit only the largest customers. I worked a lot between the backend developers and the operations team. And so I've been around the block a while and have done a number of backend services. Now, to be a little bit more somber for a second, as a former Parse team member, hearing about that shutdown hurt me physically. And to anybody who is a Parse customer in this room, I want to express my sincerest apologies. Nobody in Parse nor Firebase is happy with what's happening here today. We are not happy with the pain you've gone through. And to my former teammates in Parse, I want to express how proud I am that they have responsibly handled this tragic event. Because Firebase gave a year notice that they're doing a shutdown. They gave an open source implementation of their backend, and they've dedicated themselves to spend the next year helping customers migrate. And I think we should all say thank you for setting the bar for responsibility. So the advice I'm going to give today is generic. You don't have to have been a Parse customer to benefit from it. But I've decided to lay out the content to help people who are like me, coming from a Parse backend, understand all of the new features that are available in Firebase. We're going to start today by looking at how Firebase fits in the Google ecosystem and why Firebase can help you even if you already have a backend. Next, we're going to look at the set of products within Firebase that can help cover the feature gap between parse.com and Parse Server. Then we're going to cover some novel features unique to Firebase that have no Parse alternative. And finally, dig deep into the internals of how you build your application to see how Firebase's approach gives you some novel new tools. So we welcome you to Google, no matter where you are, no matter what you might already be running your application on, even if it's Parse Server. Because with Google, you can build just about anything. You know, when we look at a backend service, we typically compare it to one of 4 altitudes. At the very bottom, we have an infrastructure as a service. These give us the raw building blocks that we can use to build any backend, as long as we have the time and the expertise. In Google, this traditionally means Google Compute Engine, where you have access to raw virtual machines, or Google Container Engine, where you can scale up and down Docker instances. If you'd like, you can go up the stack. You can trade off some of the operational responsibility by using a platform as a service, like Google App Engine, or the up-and-coming Google Cloud Functions. These types of products let you continue developing backend code while not needing to worry about which servers your backend runs on. Now, just like you handed off some of the operational responsibility to build a platform as a service, you can go the next layer up and use a backend as a service like Firebase to hand off some of the developmental responsibilities. Because a backend as a service provides a suite of integrated features that allow you to spend most or even all of your time focused on the client code. And we're not going to spend time today covering the last level, software as a service. But I list it here today to remind you that Google is fairly unique because we have powerful and successful products at all layers of the stack. Which means when you choose to develop with Google, you are not stuck at only one altitude. You can branch out. Imagine if you have a backend today that's written on Google Compute Engine. Odds are, if you are distributing files, you're using Google Cloud Storage to do so. Now, traditionally, if you wanted to give some of those users access to files, you'd have to create your own API server to control who has access to which files. But starting today, you can use Firebase Storage, the backend as a service layer on top of the infrastructure of Google Cloud Storage. This will let you use a simple rules file to describe for your entire bucket who should have access. And it saves you the need of needing to manage and scale a service between your storage and your users. Similarly, you'll also be able to go down the stack. Today, I'm announcing that the upcoming Google Cloud Functions will fully integrate with Firebase. And you'll be able to react to changes that happen in the Firebase ecosystem as well. So this means that if you already have a backend, that's fine. And if it's at a different altitude from Firebase, that's also fine. If you've migrated from parse.com to Parse Server, you've gone from a backend as a service to an infrastructure or platform as a service. And if that's the right choice for your team, then I encourage you to stick with it. Because Firebase can help you no matter what your existing solution is today. Well, almost no matter what. First, we have a series of features that cover the product gaps between parse.com and Parse Server. These are Parse crash reporting, Parse Analytics, Parse Hosting, and Parse config. Firebase has products in all of these areas, so let's take a quick look at how you can recover these product areas and do more than you ever could before. First and foremost, you should check out Firebase Analytics. This is the crown jewel of the new Firebase product line, and it's a great place to start because you don't actually need to add any code to start using it. And there's no charge no matter how many API requests you send. If you have complex analysis needs, Firebase Analytics will integrate with Google BigQuery, which will let you slice and dice your data as you see fit. And Analytics sets the stage for many other integrations with Firebase products. So this is our new Analytics dashboard. And as you'll see, the most important feature is right up at the top. How many people are using your application? We've sliced that down into the daily, weekly, and monthly active users in your app so you can understand the depth of engagement. Next, you can scroll down and see retention cohorts. This is a fancy word for do your users keep using your app or do they get bored with it? Retention cohorts lines up your user base based on which week they started using your app. So you can look vertically down the line and see when did people stop using my app. Now, you'll also notice that this dashboard is showing results for users aged 25 to 34. Now, this application wasn't actually providing that information to Firebase. Because with Firebase, you automatically get powerful information. Without adding any code, you understand where your new users are coming from, how many of them are coming back, how long they're using your app when they do, and even demographic information like their gender, age, country, and interests, all in a free product. And if you would like, you can add extra information for analytics as well. You can describe custom attributes about your users or provide up to 500 custom types of events that you would like to send. And you can use this information to dive deeper into your groups. But if you need to compose that, you can do so in audiences. Audiences let you describe a collection of users who meet certain characteristics and who have seen certain events. You can use that audience to dive deep into a demographic in your app and understand how they use it. Or you can also use audiences to re-engage customers in your application using Firebase notifications or remote config. And like I said, you don't need to add any code to use Firebase Analytics. It's part of the core SDK. But if you'd like to add additional properties, you can say set user property string, or you can log additional events with log event with name parameters. It's that easy. So if you are like me, you occasionally write imperfect software. And one of the biggest problems I always face is tracking down what went wrong in the field. Because the first time you get a bug report, it's hard to translate what your user is describing to an actual crash dump. And the second time you get a bug report, you need to triage. Is this a new issue? Or should I save myself the time and not debug this because it's already known? When you get the third crash report, if it seems familiar, you need to figure out whether or not this is a known issue that's already been fixed, or whether that bug has regressed. And crash reporting can help you solve all three of these important problems. So in the crash reporting dashboard, you can see at a glance how many crashes are happening in your application. And there's three important metrics here. You can see the raw numbers of errors that we're managing, but we've grouped them together into clusters. Clusters are errors with similar stack traces and likely have the same root cause. This can greatly help you triage and dive into the individual reports that you see. You can also triage by how many users are impacted by these crashes. Now, when we scroll down into clusters, you can see that we have detailed information. You see the stack trace, the latest version that this app has crashed for. But you can also dive into every single error that was reported. And these reports have detailed information. You can understand what device was running this app. You can understand whether that device was jailbroken. You can understand how much memory was available in the app or what country the app was in case you're debugging maybe network issues. You can understand whether it's on Wi-Fi or cellular. And one great feature for Android is that you can report non-fatal errors as well. So you don't have to wait for a crash to start improving your stability of your app. So crash reporting also comes without code by default. It's part of the core SDK on Android. And in iOS, you just have to add the crash reporting pod. However, you can make your life easier if you'd like to add a little bit of code. First, Firebase crash.log will add a log line that only shows up in a crash report. It doesn't show up in logcat. If you want it to show up in both places, you can do that with Firebase crash.logcat. And to report a non-fatal error, Firebase crash.report. Now, if you have an existing backend, odds are you already have a server that is able to host web content. I still recommend that you check out a dedicated hosting service because it can make your life much easier. With the Firebase hosting product, you can use a simple command line tool, which is Firebase deploy. You deploy an entire copy of your static website. If you've screwed up and there's an issue, you can safely get back to a well-known version using Firebase rollback. But you can deploy with more confidence because the Firebase command line tool lets you host your website on the same or locally with the same software that we use in our infrastructure. And Firebase hosting is fast because it automatically integrates with content delivery networks to make sure your website is delivered quickly across the globe. And it's secure. We are SSL first. We manage all of the certificates that you need to handle to serve secure content. You just give us files, and we give you a fast, secure network. Firebase hosting is so easy to use, I actually struggled to come up with the follow-up slide here. So instead, I decided to give an announcement. Starting today, Firebase hosting supports custom domains absolutely free. Now, our final product gap between parse.com and parse server was parse config. And Firebase Remote Config is such a powerful product that I'm really happy to share it with you today. Because sometimes you need dynamic content in your application, but the database isn't really the right place to put it. Firebase Remote Config lets you store dynamic content just like parse config did, except you have the ability to target what you are sending according to the demographics of your user. You can send different configs to different people. So imagine you've written a newspaper app. Newspapers of old had headlines, and so we're going to add one into our application. Well, that headline is meant to drive engagement, and we'll do so with relevance. With Firebase Remote Config, you can target national breaking news to users who are in a particular country. If you have multiple headlines, you can do a tested rollout and use %rollout to do A/B testing to see whether or not the new headline is driving the engagement you expect. If you're a multilingual product, you can add translations in your remote config by providing a different config based on the language of the device that is accessing it. And if you have particular interest groups within your newspaper, those will probably be in analytics. You'll probably have an audience for people who love snowboarding or who love Google. So you can post all of your I/O news headlines to people who are in the Google lovers audience in Firebase Analytics. And using remote config is very easy. There's 3 things you need to do to get started. First, you want to provide offline defaults. These will be used either before your initial request or any time the cached value is too old to be usable. Next, you can tell remote config to fetch or fetch with expiration duration. And this will make sure you get a fresh copy of remote config if it has expired. Now, finally, once remote config has accessed the newest copy, it doesn't automatically make it available. Because it would be pretty bad if you started configuring your app with one set of config values and then continued without knowing there was an update in between. The line activate fetched helps you coordinate copies of remote config with how your application flows. Once you have the latest copy of remote config, you can use that same object just like you would a dictionary. Use bracket syntax and access any property by name, and you'll get a wrapper object back where you can get strings, ints, bools, whatever you'd like. So these features helped us gain parity from parse server back to what we used to have in parse.com. Now, before we go on to the things that are the core of your app, where you might need to choose between one backend or another, I want to give a brief shout out to some very novel features that are unique to Firebase. First, we have dynamic links. Dynamic links are like URLs for your application. They can share the location of content deep within your app. They work even for users who don't have the app installed yet. Shazam has been investing in dynamic links recently by partnering with Coca-Cola to print them on their bottle so you can get a warm welcome for users who want to try out the application. Now, in case you are not fortunate enough to be partnering with Coca-Cola, we have another product for you. With Firebase Invites, your users can send these dynamic links to their friends regardless of whether or not they're using your app. And then you can improve organic growth in your application with app indexing. App indexing allows the Google search engine to crawl the dynamic links in your app and provide deep links into your app's content in Google search results. Now, since, like I said, I am fallible and many of you are probably as well, we have Firebase Test Lab for Android. This will let you automate your app on many physical devices owned by Google, so you can get much broader test coverage without having to buy every Android device that comes out. You can increase paid growth in your application by using the new integrations with Google AdWords, so that once you've identified a group in Firebase Analytics that is more likely to engage in your application, you can target your ads to that demographic. And you can earn money in your application by using Google AdMob, which will host advertisements in your application. So now the meat of the talk. Because the remaining products are more central to the way that you build an application. Notifications, authentication, and data. So they deserve a deeper look. First and foremost, as I've said, notifications have a special place in my heart. And Firebase has two products in this sort of area. Google Cloud Messaging is now Firebase Cloud Messaging. This is the product that provides a low-level service for sending content directly to an app, for pushing data to it. It is still freely available, accessible from the same APIs, and is the platform that other providers like Parse or Urban Airship already use today to reach your devices for their push platforms. Nothing in Firebase Cloud Messaging requires you to use other Firebase services. On top of that, we've built Firebase Notifications. This is the set of products that will help you use the information you've gained from Firebase to more accurately target your users and to create notifications for those users. So let's look at the new dashboard. Obviously, a notification composer should let you type in a notification. You can also schedule that notification to be sent now or later. You can schedule it either to be now, an exact time in the future, or a time relative to the user's device. If you have that news application, you can schedule the push to be sent every morning at 8:30 at the user's time zone. But the real power of Firebase Notifications comes from its targeting framework. With Firebase Notifications, you can use all of that rich knowledge you've learned in Firebase Analytics to target your users however you'd like. You can target your users with the audiences you've created. If you're more of a parse push-to-channel person, then I recommend checking out topics. They're the same general concept. You subscribe to a topic, and then you'll receive pushes sent to that topic. The main difference between push-to-channel and using topics is that topics is about 50 times faster. And then finally, if you're testing an individual device, you can use this console to target just your device so that you can be confident you haven't just sent hello world to your entire user base. I have seen that happen, actually. It's not the greatest page to get. Also, Firebase Notifications integrates with Firebase Analytics in both directions. You can use analytics to decide who you want to engage, and you can use analytics to measure whether or not you successfully engage that audience. We automatically measure how many pushes were sent and how many were opened. But we will also be able to measure a conversion event if you apply one. In this example, we have asked the users to look at a new talk. Our goal here is that they will star that session, that they will add the talk to their favorites. And if you do so, it will show up in our analytics funnel. To understand more about Firebase Notifications and Firebase Cloud Messaging, check out these two talks. We have GCM is now FCM, which covers that foundational technology. And on top of it, we have Firebase Notifications, everything you need to know in 45 minutes. Now, I am going to give a lot of shout-outs to different talks. I will post them all in Spaces afterwards, so you don't need to go take pictures of every single slide. Firebase Off describes who's using your app, something that we're very familiar with. But Firebase Off gives you the ability to connect with all the same authentication providers you're used to and expect, and more. More importantly, Firebase Off allows you to provide your own backend service to control your own authentication, and it will be treated as a peer to our providers. This means with Firebase Off, it is so powerful that you can actually implement login, where you log in into Firebase using a parse session token. Now, for any service, if you have Parse Server, which is going to stay around, that might be a fine strategy. If you are on parse.com, I recommend that you use a migration from the client side. When someone tries to log in, you'll try to log in against Firebase. If that doesn't succeed, but does succeed against Parse, you now use those credentials that you still have in your app to create a new user in Firebase and then migrate the record from Parse user over to your Firebase database. Now, Firebase Sessions have the same power of Parse Sessions, except we've used cryptography instead of a database. Because the session token in Firebase includes all the things that you would have had in your PF session object, except it's encoded and signed by your app's private key. This means you can know for sure that the session is valid, which user it applies to, when it's supposed to expire, and any custom claims you have from your personal auth service. Rules like, this particular session is from an IoT device and therefore should have restricted access. These can all be verified directly on the session token without having to make an extra API request for every call that you make. And Firebase Off integrates with Firebase rules. See, in a system like Parse, every object describes its own access control. And as an app administrator, this can lead to uncertainty, because you can't actually audit the access control in your system unless you read through your entire app's contents. Even worse, if you need to update information or security in your application, if you need to give admins access, you would have to do a full data migration of your entire application for this to work. Instead, Firebase Auth and Firebase security rules allow you to describe in one file the rules that should be applied to entire systems, your entire Firebase database, or your entire Firebase storage bucket. And you can know with confidence that these rules are applied everywhere. So you can learn more about identity and authorization in Firebase with 3 key talks. First, there's the key to Firebase security. This will go over the languages that you'll use to secure the real-time database and Firebase storage. Next, to focus on the actual login experience, we have best practices for a great sign-in experience. And one talk I'll pitch a few times is Zero to App, developed with Firebase. This talk combines Auth, the database, and storage to create 3 apps with live coding. We'll have someone live coding at all times for iOS, Android, and web, so nobody's left out in the talk. Now, next, there we go. If you have large blobs of data, a database is not the right place to put it. So for blobs of rich data, we have Firebase Storage, the Firebase layer on top of the petabyte scale Google Cloud Storage product. Now, if you look at our dashboard, the first thing you'll see in our dashboard is that Firebase Storage is actually a standalone product. You can look at your files here. You can modify them, upload them, and you don't need to wrap your files inside other objects. Also, you'll notice that we have a Rules tab. Firebase files are secured themselves, not just objects that point to them. This means that the data you store is secure, even if the URLs leak out. And you can delete files directly. There's no more garbage collection required. And there's no more 10 megabyte limit for the files that you use in Firebase Storage, because Firebase allows you to do download and upload resuming easily. Now, Parse has not yet decided their migration strategy for parse.com and parse files. But there is a GitHub Wikipedia page, which I'll post in the spaces after this talk. On the other hand, there's very good news for Parse Server users, because Parse Server already has a plug-and-play adapter for parse files. And you can use Google Cloud Storage. There's an official node module. And since Firebase is built on Google Cloud Storage, it's reverse compatible with all of those same APIs, which means you can use one backend to have data that is both a parse file and Firebase Storage. Now, they say you save the best for last, so let's cover the Firebase RealTime database. This is the original Firebase product, and it's why 470,000 developers trust us today. The Firebase database started years ago by letting go of preconceptions of how a database needs to work. We don't need to have unstructured data just thrown in some collection. We can lay out our data to match the way we plan to present it in our application. And we don't need to restrict ourselves to just some RESTful interface. REST is nice because it's easy to think about. So Firebase does support REST for the real-time database. However, we believe that being a drag to refresh just doesn't cut it. Dragging to refresh is going to be as old tomorrow as clicking refresh to check your email is today. So, while on other systems, you might have to save an object, have a cloud code trigger, send a push notification, have that show up in your device, issue a new query, update your UI, realize that not everybody has push notifications enabled, so then also have a poll loop which damages your battery life and isn't very responsive. So add extra UI that allows you to override it with pull to refresh. We thought we had a better idea at Firebase. Let's just make the data sync. Describe the data you want, and it's pushed to devices in milliseconds. So the way we've done this is by restructuring how we show data. Data in a Firebase database is built like a giant shared JSON document, or a giant tree. And you can point to any node in that tree and say, I care about this. Once you've said you like to listen to a point in the Firebase database, any changes to that will be intelligently streamed down to your device. Now, this requires us to have an unfamiliar structure, but you can see some familiar concepts show up. If we look at the first top-level keys here, they're presentations and presenters. Now, these are the names of collections, which should sound familiar. Your first concept in most databases is your table or your class. And it's the same way in Firebase. So next, underneath the presentations collection, we'll see some gibberish, some numbers. More commonly, you'll see random strings. This is how you have a list of objects in Firebase. We have a tool called a push ID, which will generate a random string based on the server's timestamp. This allows you to insert data into Firebase and insert data into a list while avoiding collisions. With this type of layout, though, you can consider these to be the object IDs in our collection. And underneath these object IDs, you'll see that all the next keys have the same structure. These are our objects in our document object model. Now, some of these keys make sense. Location, title, and time are just strings. This last one is a little bit curious. It's a bit nested. It's structured. Well, what is this? The first key is that title, presenters. Because if you remember, that was the name of our other namespace. And remember how I said that lists of numbers or garbage strings are arrays? This is the name of a namespace being mapped to a key or to an array of inlined. Well, if we scroll down, we'll notice that presenters has a child named inline. This is how we can structure relational data in Firebase. We have the name or value of one key pointing to basically a template parameter or the location inside the database somewhere else. And that's how you can use that one reference to have a list of objects or a list of pointers to objects elsewhere in the Firebase database. So this is a new and novel approach. I know it might seem a little intimidating at first, So I wanted to share a case study from Skyscanner. Skyscanner is a very popular travel app in Europe. They have over 5 million monthly active customers. And they had built a modern web app, or sorry, a web mobile app, and they wanted to know how they were doing. So they had this feature here where they would ask the customer, how happy are you? If the customer was happy, they'd invite the user to share their feedback on the App Store or share the app with their friends. If the feedback was negative, they asked for feedback directly. So this was on another backend, and they decided to try out Firebase. They said it took them 10 hours to rewrite this whole feature using Firebase. It took them 2 days to test all of their integrations with the new Firebase products. And it took them 2 weeks to fully roll out their entire new code base. What did they say about it? It was easy to switch from the legacy solution. The web API is pretty mature for the real-time database, and it's incredibly easy to use. So I'm going to lightning fast go through some strategies of migrating data, because these are fundamentally different. They're structured differently. Typically, we talk about a background sync. You have your old app. You build a new app in a clean room. You might need some type of transformer logic, but you can use that to load and import. You can use that to test your new app with a snapshot of old data. You can drop that data if you want and restart. Next, you need to restart again and do syncing with your backend to make sure that when you have these two copies, they don't diverge. This is a bit of a challenge because you need to sync at the same time as your import, so it can't overwrite old data. I've written some cloud code for you that I'll share that can help you do these types of migrations. But the other option you can do is just take your app and put it into read-only mode while doing your initial sync, and then start your synchronization afterwards. The other option is a double write. You start with your old app, and you connect to a new database with an app that has access to both copies. First, you treat your old database as the source of truth, and you might do a backfill of data in the background. As features become available or fully migrated, you can change your source of truth to be the hybrid app. Or sorry, to be the new backend. Eventually, your old app stops being used. You can clean up your dependency on the old backend, and then write your new app. So like I said, I'm going to be sharing, there's 2 sessions to dive in deeper. Deep dive into the real-time database, and zero to app develop with Firebase. So today, we've shown you how Firebase is a suite of integrated products designed to help you develop your app, grow a user base, and earn money. We've covered how Firebase fits in the Google ecosystem, how you can add some novel tools to Firebase, or from Firebase, and how Firebase's approach to to building an app gives you novel advantages. So remember, migrating to Firebase doesn't need to mean migrating away from something else. We've shown you how the Firebase tools can help you solve problems in ways you haven't been able to before. What's next? We have the rest of Firebase.com or Firebase.google.com. Join online. I'd love to hear what you've been doing, what you love about the new Firebase, and how we can improve. So thank you very much on behalf of myself and my partner, Silvana, who wrote the migration guide. I will be spending the rest of my time out in the tent, or I'll be at all of the afternoon sessions at I/O. Thank you.